Restaurants in the Netherlands are completely different than restaurants back home. And in this video, I'm going to explain all of the ways in which Dutch restaurants are different than American restaurants. That said, the first major difference between Dutch restaurants and American restaurants is that the servers here are paid a livable wage. So if you didn't know, back home, generally speaking, a lot of servers are paid below minimum wage, and depending on what state you live in, the minimum wage might be higher or lower. In the state that I come from, the minimum wage was $7.25 an hour, but it's not uncommon for a server to make something along the lines of $3 or $4 an hour. And I know what you're thinking, that shouldn't be legal. And guess what? I completely, totally agree with you. I completely agree that servers should be paid a livable wage. However, a lot of times, because of tips, which I'll touch on here in a second, servers in the US actually end up making more than they do here, because there's technically no limit to how much they can make from the tips. But it also changes the whole dynamic of your experience of eating out at a restaurant. Now, you heard me mention tipping just a second ago, and that's the next big difference between American restaurants and Dutch restaurants, is that in American restaurants, it is customary and socially and morally expected of you to tip 20% at that. Now, this only really applies to restaurants where you sit at the table and they take your order, they bring you your food. You don't need to tip at fast food restaurants like Taco Bell or McDonald's or Chipotle, anywhere like that. But when it comes to a traditional restaurant, let's say an Applebee's or a Cheesecake Factory, Olive Garden, somewhere like that, any restaurant where you sit down and the server comes up to you, you are expected to pay 20% of the bill as a tip. So you see the bill and you pay 120% in total of what the bill is. Now, I don't know why this car is stopping like that. I'm gonna go back this way because I don't know what they have going on. Anyways, 20% of the bill for tips. Now again, this can add up over time, but this only really works depending on your turn time. Now you're probably wondering, well, what is a turn time? If you never worked in a restaurant, you probably don't know what a turn time is. Basically, a turn time is how long a specific customer or a group of customers stay at the table that you are serving them at. Now, I would imagine that this isn't a thing here in the Netherlands. I don't know because I've never worked at a restaurant here. I only worked at a restaurant back home, an IHOP in particular. But at the IHOP that I worked at, and I assume at most, if not all, other restaurants that rely on tips, basically you have what is known as a turn time. And generally speaking, if you're a server, you want the turn time to be as low as you can possibly get it, because a lower turn time equates to more tips. So this brings me to the next point about how American restaurants are different than Dutch restaurants. And as you'll see throughout the video, basically everything leads back to the servers making less than minimum wage back home. Everything leads back to that in one way or another. But essentially, whenever you have a high turn time, that provides you with fewer opportunities to get a lot of tips. And because of that, you end up making less money on that particular day. And if you have bills to pay, that can be problematic. So again, you want to get the turn time as low as possible, which means that generally you're going to sort of hassle the customers. And I say hassle, but really you're going up to them, you're asking them if they need help, things of that nature, asking them if they're ready for the bill, things like that. Here, people don't really do that. The servers don't really do that. I guess it's probably seen as rude, and it also seems like people tend to stay at restaurants much longer than they did back home, because again, turn time isn't really much of an issue. I'm gonna go ahead and walk back this way because I don't want to walk near the street. There's already enough noise as it is with this wind. But here, people tend to stay much longer at their tables and at the restaurants because there's no pressure from the servers to leave. If you ever wonder why servers are doing that, why they keep asking you if you need any help, that is the reason why. It is because they are trying to lower their turn time so that they can make more tips. Don't take it personal. It doesn't mean that they don't like you. It just means that they have bills to pay just like you do. And given the conditions that they have with making less than minimum wage, more than likely, they need to find a way to make more money from more tips. So that is also why, I don't know why this van is just pulling up like this. I don't know, today there's a lot of sketchiness going on. Crazy weather, all of that. But anyways, I digress. I don't think I've ever walked this way before actually, so we're gonna explore this together. But generally speaking, that is the reason why these servers will quote unquote hassle you and keep coming up to your table and interrupting your conversation. It's not personal, it's because they need to lower their turn times. Now, on the topic of money, on the topic of tipping and minimum wage and all of that, restaurants here make money in a different way than American restaurants do. What do I mean by that? Well, hold on, what is this? I don't know what all of this is. I guess maybe they're gonna build something new here. But anyways, go ahead and walk this way. This woman's running up here. Anyways, here, more often than not, it's my understanding at least, that restaurants make most of their profit from the drinks. They make most of their profit from beverages rather than food. And generally speaking, I think for even American restaurants, food is a pretty low margin thing. I think restaurants aren't usually the best business model, but different discussion for a different day. Here, more often than not, the restaurants profit by beverages, which means that you don't get free refills. You do not get free refills here in the Netherlands like you do back home. Back home, if they see that your glass is empty, they will come up to you. They might not even ask if you want a refill. They might just go ahead and give you one, and it's free. It's absolutely free. And not only that, but the drinks back home tend to be a lot bigger. The drinks tend to be a lot bigger. And not only that, but the portion sizes back home for the food tend to be bigger as well, which again is probably not very good for the margins, but they make up for that by paying the servers below minimum wage, which I'm not saying that's good or bad. It just is what it is. It's a difference. I have no opinion on the matter because I don't own or work in a restaurant. That said, it definitely makes a big difference on your dining experience, especially for someone like me who drinks a lot of water. Okay, I drink 4 liters of water a day. You're like, 4 liters? Yeah, 4 liters a day, 1 gallon, a little over a gallon actually. And as a matter of fact, I need to pee really badly as I'm making this video, so I'm probably gonna wrap this up pretty soon. But I drink a lot of water, and back home what I would usually do was I would bring my gallon of water with me to the restaurant, and it would never really be an issue. You can't do that here. Here you can't bring your own beverages to the restaurant because again, that's where they're going to make their money. So if you want water, you're gonna have to drink the restaurant's water, and if you order a large water, they're gonna bring a cup that's about yay big, give or take. I would say the large water here, or a large drink here, is about the same size as a medium or a small, depending on what restaurant you go to, a medium or a small back home. So rest assured that they are profiting very well off of me, because I'm drinking at least 3 or 4 of those cups while I'm there. They are profiting very, very well off of me because again, they're making most of their margins from the drinks. Now, on the topic of drinks, another thing that I've noticed, another difference between Dutch restaurants and American restaurants, and this is one that you might have heard of before, but in the Netherlands, and I think in most of Europe, maybe even most of the rest of the world, they don't give you ice with your drink. I would imagine that if you specifically ask for it, they will give you more, or they will give you ice, that is. But I personally have never asked for it because, well, I want to maximize that little drink that I have. If the cup is going to be this big, I want to make sure that it is all water. I don't want any ice in there, because that means that I'm going to pay the same amount for less water, and that's just not something that I'm personally interested in. But for somebody who isn't drinking water, for somebody who doesn't only drink water, maybe you like lemonade or something, I don't know, it's probably also better to not have ice, because when you have another drink and the ice begins to melt, it waters down your drink and it makes it taste much worse, in my opinion at least. So I would say that that's actually a good thing. And then on top of that, it doesn't really get very hot out here, so there's really no need to have ice in your drinks. But again, even if you did want it, I'm sure you could get it. It just wouldn't really make much sense. Now, the next thing that I've noticed about Dutch restaurants in comparison to American restaurants is that Dutch restaurants always seem to have an outdoor eating area. There always seems to be an outdoor eating area. I don't really know if there's a specific word for it, but basically this is actually a thing I think in most of Europe as well, is that you have the restaurant, you have the inside, and then you'll have an outdoor eating area. So it basically extends to the outside. You have tables, and maybe you'll have a covering, ideally, because the weather here typically doesn't favor being outside, as you can see. But a lot of people opt for these outdoor eating areas, and they'll use the opportunity to converse and people watch at the same time. So I don't know, maybe they're just sitting there and making fun of people as they walk by. I don't know, maybe they make fun of me with my camera. But it's definitely a stark difference, and something that I wouldn't have particularly expected if I didn't already know about it, just because the weather here, again, doesn't really favor being outside.